Hey guys. So today I'm going to be talking about a subject that I don't think I've necessarily broached before, and it's my deep passion for video games. And what I'm going to be talking about today is the new Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League. I have a lot of opinions about the game in general, even though I have not played it, which I think honestly is going to be the biggest disqualifier for me being able to talk about the gameplay. But I think that's the whole point about this video, is because I'm not going to be talking about the gameplay. I have a lot of opinions about just the directions that video games are going from an artistic perspective, because it's not looking good, folks. It's not looking good. To preface this, I have been a gamer since I was 5-6 years old. I'm nearly 30 now. I remember specifically the moment actually when I got my first video game. It was a Sonic game on the Game Boy Advance, and I specifically remember actually my cousins had a Game Boy Advance before me, and I always had a ton of fun going over to their house and playing the Sonic game on their Game Boy Advance. And so my mom, one day, I had walked in from my garage door into my kitchen in my old home, and my mom gifted me a Game Boy Advance with that same Sonic game. And again, this is when I was like probably 5 or 6 years old. I cannot remember which Sonic game it was, but from then on, it was kind of like floodgates were opened. I was always a Sony kid for the most part. You know, I was a part of the whole PS versus Xbox war. PlayStation and Xbox had their big feud. And I was throughout all of that, the whole console war and console superiority and PC gods and all that kind of stuff. And so needless to say, without getting too far into my own history with video games, I'm not a newcomer. I was on the forefront really of, or at least a part of the section of video games that first had to deal with, I guess, the topic of what would be today's video. And it's the rampant monetization of video games, which is turning into the rampant monetization of art. I am a long time enjoyer of narratives. I've written 5 books and I'm working on my 6th and my 7th. Have edited stories of cross plays, video games themselves. I'm actually working with a client basically right now, working on a video game, and my clients are in a position most of the time where they don't have outside influences kind of telling them what to do with their fictions. It is their complete creative property, and they do with what they wish. And now, of course, they take criticism and feedback, but ultimately it's their decision, and it's the themes and tones and the artistic expression that they want to make that ultimately comes through in the writing. And I think that is able to touch a lot of people on a personal level. Video games for a very long time were like that as well. You had video games be considered a niche pretty much just for kids, and a lot of video games, you know, or especially early video games, presented as unserious kind of childlike frivolities that people would engage in just because, you know, they didn't have anything better to do on, you know, a Sunday afternoon for an hour and a half. But of course, as time went on from the 80s and 90s, and then especially in the 2000s, we got more narrative-based video games. And before the advent of the internet, companies had the kind of conception that the better we make this game upon release, the better it's going to sell, which is going to make us more money, right? Which I think is ultimately a healthy loop for the artistic kind of creative process. It's a feedback loop that I think allows a company to still say, we want our profits to be tied to art, but the better the art is, the more profit we'll make. And the more profit we'll make, the better we can make our art. And so this is how you got stuff you know, in the early days, and I don't want to say early as if it started off like this. You know, I remember when Assassin's Creed 1 came out, I believe in 2007, and it was the highest grossing, I think, new IP on a console ever. And if not that, I know it was somewhere up there. But Assassin's Creed 1 took a lot of interesting and unique steps from an open world third-person video game perspective that not really had been done before. The thing that Ubisoft kind of hung its hat on was its parkour and scaling system with the environment. And of course that carried Assassin's Creed on to what it is now, which is a part of the problem. The problem that I alluded to before, that I kind of was on the at least experienced the forefront of, was microtransactions. Because I think what microtransactions are doing is it's incentivizing companies to no longer make games as artistically good as possible to be able to make money, it's incentivizing them to make games as like content dense as possible in order to make money, because they realize now the money that they're making is not coming from the purchase of the game itself. The money that they're making is coming from the purchase of materials after you purchase the game, which then means that they don't actually have to release the game in a state that's valid to you, right? That to the consumer, that puts you in a position of being satisfied with their product, because they've basically been told, hey, we are going to just roll out content and fix the issues that we have on release, and you're just going to buy it anyway. So why would I even care about making this game good on release? And why this is personal to me is because for the Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League specifically, I remember like Arkham coming out. I played and 100%ed. It was the first game I ever 100%ed actually, was Batman Arkham Asylum. Specifically because I think the game design that Rocksteady was able to do really incentivized you to look for the Riddler trophies, and it made it so interactive, and the combat was revolutionary, and it was a single player experience. It's funny that this Batman series has lived long enough to see itself become the villain. Rocksteady as a video game company, as a production company for these games, was pushed to, instead of making a single player game, make Justice League Kills the Suicide Squad into a live service, microtransaction fueled game service instead of a single player game. It really hurts because this was a company that a lot of people trusted, right? So over the course of years, gamers have been systematically basically betrayed over and over and over again. No Man's Sky was, there's vast promises around the capabilities of No Man's Sky's procedural generation. Star Citizen has been promised to come out for what, like a decade now? I could go on, and that's just off the top of my head, but gaming has become, I believe, the biggest form of recreational entertainment like in the world. And it holds a near and dear place to my heart because it's so interactive. It's like the closest you can get to actually being a part of the story, aside from like Dungeons and Dragons, which I think is maybe the peak because you're creating the story along with the dungeon master and all of your friends. Where like a video game though is like maybe just a step down, and you're literally like doing the stuff, you're progressing the story. And I am terrified now of the reaction from companies to continuously try to abuse some of like the most loyal customers on the planet, which are gamers, into just like continuously like scarfing down slop. Pokemon, which again is one of my favorite franchises, Pokemon was another franchise that I got into when I was like 7 or 8. I remember specifically getting Pokemon Emerald, nearly 100% of that game as well. That was the first game where I completed the Pokedex. But Pokemon for years has not tried to innovate or improve in any meaningful way that also allowed for smooth and consistent gameplay. I think Pokemon Arceus was a very good step in the right direction, but Game Freak, I think, is trying to rush out products to be able to meet the demands of the huge Pokemon universe, the card games and the anime, but at the expense of not making good art, because they're not seeing Pokemon as art anymore. And this whole rant and ramble is basically to say that even though I do fear the direction that video games are going in, I do have hope still. And, it's bittersweet that Larian was able to produce Baldur's Gate 3, which ultimately stands as one of the best games ever made. But the reason it's bittersweet is because so many gaming companies were frothing at the mouth and racing to try to tell us gamers that we should not expect Baldur's Gate quality from other games, which is, on face value, sure, it's reasonable. Because again, Baldur's Gate 3 is one of the best games ever made. But it's also like, why is that your first instinct to have to like tell us, no, things can't be good. Like things can't be this good. Don't expect us to make things this good, when it's kind of like, why not? Like, sure, we don't want you to make generationally good games every time you put out a game. But this idea that video games can't be innovative and craft with love and reflect something, I think, unique, rather than being built around pretty much what's gambling in like loot boxes, is insulting to a lot of gamers, and it's insulting to me. I hope gamers speak up and speak out, and start, you know, voting in the best way we can with our wallets, and telling these companies, both online and again in the stores, that these are not games and the qualities of games that we want to have continuously given to us. We need to reward the companies and talk about the companies and uplift the companies that are genuinely making art still, who just also happen to make money. I think we're on the verge too of kind of like the VR revolution and gaming becoming ubiquitous across multiple age groups. I'm 30 now and gaming. My dad was 30 years old and had never touched a video game and probably will never touch a video game. I know 40-year-old men who game. I know 4-year-old children who game. Sooner or later, I think gaming is going to be kind of like a lifestyle spread wide, just as reading is, right? Across all age groups. And I don't want it to become influenced by these companies who really only seem to care about profit and loot boxes. So that's my video. Those are my opinions on it. I hope to do more stuff like this. Sometimes it's like hard for me to even come up with topics to talk about because like this isn't necessarily what I think about doing. But if you guys liked it, let me know down in the comments. Maybe I can do some game reviews in the future. They take a lot of time, but I'd be interested. But yeah, thanks for watching. If you like what you heard, support on Patreon. Honestly, it helps so much. I really do need it. And yeah, stick around for more. So as always, it was a pleasure, and I'll talk to you all again soon.